Do you have herpes? Holy shit, that must suck. Well, look, here's the thing, guys. A lot of you watching this video right now probably have herpes, and you don't even realize it. My name is Stirling Cooper. I'm an award-winning adult film star. I'm also a former high-class male companion, and this is my YouTube channel. I'm gonna break down the herpes simplex virus, explain it, explain how it's transmitted between individuals, the treatments, the symptoms, and a whole bunch of other stuff, so you guys can be educated on this particular STD. Let's get stuck into it. So what is herpes? Herpes is the herpes simplex virus, HSV. Now, it comes in two types, HSV1, which is known as the oral strain, and HSV2, which is the genital strain. Now, here's the thing. Most people are kind of familiar with cold sores, the little blisters that people get around their mouth. Cold sores are HSV1. Cold sores are a type of herpes. Now, when most people talk about herpes, though, they tend to be referring to HSV2, the genital strain. However, it's very important to understand the similarities between these two viruses and the cross-contamination you can get between them, and I'll explain that right now. So a very important thing for everyone to realize when it comes to herpes is that this virus can contaminate and cross-contaminate in both the oral and genital regions. So what do I mean by that? Well, like I said before, most people don't think of cold sores as herpes. They kind of think of it as something different. It's actually a type of herpes. So what this means is if somebody is having an outbreak of the oral variety of herpes, aka a cold sore, and then that partner of yours then goes down on you, they can give you the HSV1, the oral variety of herpes, in your genital region, and it will cause outbreaks in the genital region. Vice versa, somebody can have the genital version, the HSV2 version of herpes, and have an outbreak, and then if you unsuspectingly go down on them, you can contract the HSV2 variant in the oral region and then end up having outbreaks of that variety in the oral region. So these two types of herpes, although they do prefer to live in one place or the other, they're not restricted to them. And that is very, very important to know. In particular, with cold sores, because they're far more prevalent, people need to be aware that they should, one, avoid the giving, and two, avoid receiving oral sex from somebody who is having a cold sore or oral herpes outbreak. This is very, very important. Now, at the beginning of this video, I said that you may actually have herpes and you don't even realize it. So what do I mean by that? Well, the World Health Organization has estimated that around 67% of the adult population on the planet has HSV1. That's the oral type of herpes, that's cold sores. And 13% of the adult population has HSV2, that's the genital type of herpes. So look at those numbers, that's quite significant. That is not a trivial small amount of people on the planet. So why don't we see it more often, and why is no one really talking about this? Well, let's get into that. Now, if you weren't aware, the symptoms of herpes are basically little blisters or ulcers that appear on the skin in the oral region and the genital region. So here is why those numbers I quoted a minute ago might be rather shocking. And that is because most people who have the virus, or a large percentage of at least of people who have either types of the herpes virus, are asymptomatic, which means they don't get the blisters, they don't get the lesions, they don't get any of this stuff. They're asymptomatic, they're not showing symptoms. However, that does not mean that you cannot pass the virus on if you're asymptomatic. When you have the virus can still go through what's called a shedding phase. So you might not get blisters or anything like this, but this virus lives basically in the nerve endings around these different areas of the body. And when the virus decides to shed, those viral particles are still being shed, despite the fact that there's no blister or ulcer there. So even though you're asymptomatic, it is still possible, although a lot less likely, significantly less likely, but it is still possible for you to pass the virus on to somebody else without you even knowing that you have the damn thing. And even though if you are asymptomatic, if you pass the virus on, the person you pass it on to, they might not be asymptomatic. That's where a whole pile of drama can come in. People, one partner accusing the other one of cheating on them, giving them herpes, blah, 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 and you didn't even friggin' know that you had it in the first place. Isn't that a mindfuck? So how do you test for herpes? Well, usually the way it's done is you go into the doctor if you have the symptoms, you have like an outbreak or something, you see these blisters and these lesions, these ulcers on your skin. You go to a doctor and they'll basically diagnose you on a visual examination, and then what they'll do is they'll take a tissue culture, a viral sample from those blisters, those ulcers, and then they'll run a PCR test on that to confirm whether or not it is the herpes simplex virus. Now, here's the really interesting thing. Most STI panels, sexually transmitted infection, STD, sexually transmitted disease panels that you can get either professionally in my industry or for the average person, don't actually test your blood for the herpes simplex virus. Isn't that interesting? You might be asking, why the hell is that? And it basically comes down to what I said before, that this is such a prevalent STD. Like I said before, HSV1 is in 67% of the population, HSV2 is in 13% of the population. This is estimated numbers, of course. But that is such a prevalence that it's bouncing around between the human population so much that they don't test for it in STIs. And because it isn't a life-threatening STI, it is more of an inconvenience. It's not as bad as kind of people really make it out to be. And the reason I know this is because there's a lot of guys in the adult film industry, veterans who've been, I'm not going to name names, but veterans who've been in it for like 20 plus years, who have the virus, but they take their antiviral medication and they're still able to shoot without passing the virus on. And that is something that is very, very important to understand. So let's get into the treatments for this virus. So it's important to know that you cannot cure the herpes virus infection at this stage with modern technology anyway, that I'm aware of. So how do you sort of curb this infection? Well, they use antiviral medication. The brand names are commonly referred to as acyclovir and valacyclovir, and I think famciclovir is another one. But these are a range or a family of antiviral medications that are taken basically daily, popping a tablet daily, and that keeps the viral load down, prevents outbreaks, stops you from passing the virus on to other people. And as I mentioned before, like I said, I know guys who've been in my industry for like 20 odd years who have been taking this stuff for a long time, and they don't go and pass the virus on to their co-stars when they're shooting. And they don't have an outbreak, more importantly. So that is a testament to the fact that these antiviral medications actually do work. They're one of the most commonly used and prescribed antiviral medications around because, as I mentioned before, of the prevalence of the herpes simplex virus. But how do you protect yourself from getting this virus in the first place, especially in the genital area? It's very simple, my friend. Condoms. If you wrap your goddamn tool, there's no exposed skin for any potential viral lesions to make contact with, or blisters and ulcers to make contact with, and thus transfer the virus. So something as simple as wrapping your tool, and wrapping it properly, mind you, like pulling the condom all the way down to the base of your shaft, covering as much skin as you possibly can. And that's why it's very important to wear a properly fitting condom. Now, another important thing to note is if you have the HSV2 strain, the genital strain of herpes, this increases your risk of acquiring and transmitting HIV. So, watch this video right here to find out if you have HIV.